Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Nick Blumberg. Amanda Vinicky has the evening off. President-elect Donald Trump begins announcing cabinet picks with some choices raising eyebrows, even among Republicans.
I'm calling on the House Ethics Committee to preserve and share their report and all relevant documentation on Mr. Gates with the Senate Judiciary Committee.
As Trump starts rolling out his nominees, Democrats try to roll out some roadblocks for candidates they call unqualified and dangerous.
We really are a beacon, not just in the Midwest, but across the country when it comes to women's reproductive health. And we believe those protections would be in place even if Trump and the Congress tried to pass a national abortion ban based on states' rights.
Lawmakers return to Springfield for the fall veto session and start conversations about, quote, Trump-proofing Illinois.
I've said from the very beginning, this is a proposal. I'm a collaborative mayor. For the first time in the history of Chicago, you're actually seeing that type of collaborative approach.
Alderpeople engage in some collaboration of their own, joining together to unanimously vote down Mayor Brandon Johnson's $300 million property tax hike proposal. Meanwhile, attorneys for former House Speaker Michael Madigan start mounting their defense. And the Bears start looking at yet another potential new stadium site, the former Michael Reese Hospital campus in Bronzeville. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Laura Washington of ABC 7 News and the Chicago Tribune, Danny Ecker of Crane's Chicago Business, Ray Long of the Chicago Tribune, and joining us from Springfield via Zoom, Mawa Iqbal of WBEZ. Let's get right to it. The president-elect's choice for Attorney General Matt Gaetz resigned from the House shortly after he was announced, and right before an ethics panel report about claims of drug use, sex with minors was set for release, allegations, we should say. Laura, we heard Senator Durbin calling on that panel to preserve that report. Do you think this could escalate to, say, one chamber of Congress subpoenaing another?
That's definitely a possibility. There's going to be some tensions around it. Now, of course, he resigned so that in the hopes that that report would not be released. As you say, some folks think that's very necessary. The Speaker of the House today said, though, that he did not believe it was appropriate to release it because Gaetz is no longer in Congress.
But certainly this is not something that seems likely to go away with a potential confirmation process.
I think there's going to be a furious fight over it. You know, Donald Trump has a lot of controversial appointments here, and and it looks like, given the controversy that surrounds so many of them, he's not going to be able to get them all through, and so he's going to probably have to do some wheeling and dealing with even within his own party.
Well, another controversial choice, Democrats, reportedly some Republicans, raising concerns about Trump's choice for Defense Secretary. That's former Fox News personality Pete Hegseth, who, among other things, has said women should not serve in combat roles. Here's what Iraq War combat veteran and Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth had to say.
Truck driver is a job that women have been doing since World War I, where some of the most often hit people in Iraq by being hit with IEDs. So this idea that you can exclude women from combat is really one that shows his lack of experience and really, him being unqualified to be the Secretary of Defense, because it's not where modern warfare is.
Even on a more nitty-gritty level, Ray, Hegseth doesn't have the kind of management experience overseeing thousands of employees as he would be at the Pentagon. Is that the kind of thing that matters to the president-elect necessarily?
I think the president is looking for loyalists, and he wants people who can carry out whatever he wants them to do. Whether you view that or whether it is retribution or not, I believe that that's what he's trying to get, is a group of people who will do what he wants without question. And that is what a lot of the Democrats fear.
And I think the President-elect Trump is also a disruptor. He loves the idea. He campaigned on this the first time and again on taking down Washington, throwing out all the rules, throwing out all the traditions, and doing it his way. And these are people. Obviously, many of these folks are disruptors in their own right, and that's the kind of thing he's looking for.
Yeah, some of the picks he made during his first administration were maybe more mainline Republicans that were familiar faces in Washington. This time around, it doesn't really seem like that's much of a concern.
One of the things about it, though, is that this is how unpredictable the whole thing is, right? That's what I think. What people who were thinking this would be a pro-business vote, this is better for the economy to have someone like Trump in there. there's a lot of unpredictability that's in play now with some of these appointments and what you're going to see and how this is all going to play out in various departments, different policies. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how, the people watching this see what are these people, if they are confirmed, what are they going to do? And how's that going to really affect, what businesses are going to do and decisions that people are going to be making.
Well, although I think that some of these appointments he did foreshadow, like the RFK Jr. Appointment, for example, for Health and Human Services. There was a deal that was made when Kennedy agreed to support him, and we saw this coming. So I think some of the voters should have seen this coming, and some of this shouldn't have been a big surprise.
Mama Iqbal, we were talking about confirmation, hearings with the GOP controlling the Senate confirmation process. Do you expect any Republican members to potentially oppose some of Trump's picks?
Not really. I mean, I think, well, I guess maybe if there are more moderate Republicans in the Senate who might want to depart away from more of what you were saying as Trump's loyalist picks, probably, but.
Yeah, it seems like it's probably a fairly clear road for at least most of these folks, but perhaps not all of them. I mean, Ray, given the idea that RFK is going to potentially be the Health and Human Services Secretary, is that the kind of thing that, say, state and local public health departments are going to be worried about?
Well, I think there are concerns all across the nation about this, but there are also concerns that Democrats ought to get out of the way and we ought to clean all these places up. Now, you may not agree with that, and a lot of people don't, but I think there are people out there who say, yeah, let's put Matt Gaetz in there and get rid of all the things that Democrats were hiding, as if they were hiding a lot of stuff. But if they get somebody like Matt Gaetz in there, I do believe that it'll be Katie bar the door what could happen.
Laura, given that Trump took all 7 swing states in play last week, as well as the popular vote, are there lessons that Illinois Democrats should be taking to heart? Are there things, even though, especially in the General Assembly, folks did well, are there things people should be paying attention to here?
Well, obviously the Democrats misread this election, and they banked, I think, too much on some of those wedge issues like reproductive choice, like the issue of whether or not the democracy is going to be saved, and they completely missed the fact that people were most concerned about the economy, even though all the warning signals were there. And that's going to be continue to be something they're going to really have to look at and pay closer attention to, even in a state like Illinois, which has a progressive governor, which has a progressive General Assembly, but people still, when it comes down to what's most important in the bottom line, is going to be their own personal interest in the economy.
Yeah. Well, it's the spending. I mean, if they're finding bigger prices at the grocery store, that's their economy. And that's what the Democrats overlooked. You can say, hey, the economy's doing great, we're doing better than any place else in the world, but if it's not showing up when you go to the grocery store line or the gas pump, then you're going to have an issue.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the economy is doing better, even if you look at some of the metrics around jobs, around inflation. Absolutely. We mentioned this idea of quote-unquote Trump-proofing Illinois. Mawa Iqbal, Democratic lawmakers, the governor are thinking about, how do we prepare for a second Trump administration? What is on their agenda now that they're back in Springfield for the veto session and certainly looking ahead to next year as well?
Yeah, so Governor Pritzker, he's working with the Colorado Governor Jared Polis to create this coalition called the Governors Safeguarding Democracy. And we don't have too many details on what it is yet. We know that it's a nonpartisan group. So Pritzker said that this is open to Democratic governors as well as Republican. Anyone who, has the interest of quote unquote protecting democracy. They haven't really named Trump specifically in their material. So they have a website for it. It doesn't name, where trying to Trump-proof our state-level democratic institutions, but it definitely is implied. Governor Pritzker has said at press conferences just in regards to this that, this is something that we are trying to make sure that, under a Trump administration, if they come after, let's say mass deportations and family separation of undocumented immigrants, if they come after, environmental regulations or rolling back reproductive rights access, then how can we as governors, and specifically in Illinois, work to prove that? And so it's interesting, but I think, he said too that he doesn't have a specific agenda yet because it is still too early to tell, right? the administration hasn't actually taken effect yet. So he said it's going to be something that they'll see probably in lame duck session, which will be in January, or in the spring session that starts later in that month.
Do you think it's possible we might see something like a constitutional amendment enshrining abortion access here in Illinois, an idea that's been kind of bandied about before?
It's definitely, I mean, it's something that Pritzker ran on when he was running for re-election as governor, and it kind of sort of dissipated a little bit, I will say, after he was elected. I remember asking him about it and reading about it, and he had said that it's not really a priority for us at this point in time, just because of all the robust protections that Illinois has enacted to protect abortion access. But certainly, I mean, like, now that the administration has changed, right? He said all that during the Biden administration. Now that the administration has changed, and it's unclear whether Trump will push forward with a nationwide abortion ban. I know he's tried to distance himself from that, but also so I guess, we'll see if the lawmakers try to, bring that effort back again to codify abortion rights in the state constitution.
Well, Ray, we heard from Speaker Welch earlier this week on the show saying, Illinois laws, ensuring reproductive rights would be safe from federal action because of states' rights. If further federal restrictions go into place, do you think that states' rights argument is likely to hold up?
This is another, who knows what the U.S. Supreme Court is going to do question. And I would think that you could argue that strongly and make a good case, and in a normal world you might be able to win that argument. The current U.S. Supreme Court has not always followed what has been precedent, and so they could deviate on almost anything here.
Yeah. Well, and on a local level, Mawa mentioned the idea of mass deportations. We heard from Mayor Brandon Johnson this week saying Chicago is going to remain a sanctuary city. For example, the city officials won't cooperate with ICE. But I mean, Danny, even so, given the promise of mass deportations, how concerned do you think city officials are, alder people are, about what's next?
Well, you have to remember that, during the Trump administration the first time around, Chicago was a punching bag for him, especially on social media. I think that's, especially now that we have a governor who has a kind of rising profile on a national stage, potentially over the next few years becoming someone that Trump maybe targets or sees as a bit of a foil. And does that bring more negative attention from the president-elect to Illinois, to Chicago? That's not helpful for tourism, for other things that Chicago relies on. And so I think that's going to be something to watch, to see, certainly that Chicago becoming this maybe a face and for on a national scale for being an anti-Trump area. Right.
Well, we've already seen this over the last year or so in terms of the assault from states like Texas that have sent all these migrants here. That was very, very political, and it was an attempt to jam the city and to force the city into a really difficult position in terms of having to find the funding for all that. We are a sanctuary city. The mayor has been very strong on that. He's going to continue to be strong on that, but that may make the Chicago an even bigger target going forward. And there's the issue of federal funding. There's the possibility that the Trump administration could withhold federal funding if we continue this policy in terms of protecting immigration rights.
Yeah. Well, and speaking again of Springfield, Mawa Iqbal, the state's also facing this projected $3 billion budget deficit for the coming fiscal year. We heard some Republican demands earlier this week on budget issues. What's the latest there in terms of what lawmakers are thinking about this pretty big potential deficit?
Yeah, I mean, you have the Republican lawmakers that are coming at this with full force. And like we were talking about just now, Pritzker's national profile. So the Senate Republican leadership held a press conference earlier this week in Springfield where they kind of criticized Pritzker for being, gallivanting across the country and having these aspirations of running for president in 2028 when he should be, back home and worried about this budget deficit. And for the Republicans, and this is something that they've said, for the past few years now, is that we need to cut spending on the state's Medicaid program for undocumented adults. They say that it's billions of dollars in spending, and we need to cut that now to sort of offset some of this deficit. But certainly I think it'll be interesting to see what the Democratic budgeteers and the leadership decide to do, if they decide to offset some of the deficit with more tax increases, which is something that they've done in the previous budget cycle. It'll be interesting, but I think for now, because we're still in veto session, they haven't really had much discussion about what they would want to do.
Gallivanting is an excellent vocab word. That'll be the word of the night. That's my prediction here. Well, closer to home, Chicago's budget deficit will not be filled in part with that $300 million property tax. Laura, were you surprised to see the council vote against it unanimously, or did folks see the way the political winds were blowing?
That was an extraordinary vote. I mean, you haven't seen a vote like that in the city council. Most of the veteran city council members have said they haven't seen that, certainly in their tenures. And to have it be that early on in the budgeting process, the mayor, he retroactively, after he put the number out there, he said, well, that was just a negotiating point. But the problem was, I think the city council was not included in any discussions, any negotiations until after the cat was out of the bag, and they made it very clear that they weren't going to go for that. There'd be tremendous pressure on them to vote against this because their voters don't want it.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting to think about it as an opening argument, as though these are, two sides of the table negotiating a contract versus a mayor hypothetically working with his city council. I mean,
the chief collaborator, as he calls himself.
Exactly. I mean, Ray, does this further weaken the mayor's relationship with alder people, or does it demonstrate that the relationship's already kind of fraught?
Well, I think it's the latter, and I do think that there is history that he should be studying here. And oddly enough, it was Paul Vallis, while he was working with, he was a chief budget guy for Mayor Daley, who had worked with aldermen to bring out, correct me if I'm wrong here, Laura, but I believe it was a unanimous vote on a budget. If it wasn't unanimous, it was clearly close to.
Right.
And that was because they worked ahead of time and worked with the aldermen to address their requests, their needs, all of their concerns. And if you just come out and say, hey, we're going to do this thing and we're not going to do anything but because we're going to protect jobs, that may be talking to his base, and maybe he's looking for somebody to blame when he has to make cuts, if he has to make cuts, and say, hey, the city council forced me to do it.
Of course, the aldermen also get to now say, hey, we said no to this in a resounding way.
Sure.
Right.
So everyone gets to do their jockeying and,
Right.
doesn't really help us toward getting to fixing the problem.
Well, now the ball is back in the city council's court now. So, okay, so you don't want
Right.
this $300 million, so where is the money going to come from? And this is a very unusual place for the alder persons to be in, because usually the mayor has been in charge, even though we supposedly live in a strong council weak mayor city.
Yeah, but it's the kind of vote that, they don't want to have their opponents having mailers out in 2027 saying, oh, look at who, look how they voted on this. Another item this week, the CPS board approved a resolution trying to approve the Acero Charter Network not to close 7 schools, but they don't really seem to have any actual power to stop it. Danny Ecker, is there value in a symbolic vote from the CPS board here?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think that honestly, when it comes to the CPS drama, it's just, you look at this as you say, what's the impact on the city as a whole and the perception of the city? And I think anytime you have more of this stuff coming on and happening, you just look at families who are saying, here's another reason why I should be concerned about having my kids in CPS.
Yeah.
That's what you have to avoid as the city, and I think you kind of lose sight of it when you are looking at the drama around Pedro Martinez and the board.
Yeah, well, and there's also, the board retained the firm Cozen O'Connor. Hypothetically, this is so that they can find cause to fire CEO Pedro Martinez. I mean, how big of an ongoing distraction is this mayor's fight with Martinez?
Huge. It's huge. And everybody's looking for a reason that they can justify his ouster. And, he may be the only guy standing in the breach there trying to hold back some of the mayor's more distractions or the mayor's desires to get rid of him. And it's really puzzling, too. And it's just this cascading effect here. We have the current situation with the closing schools, but we've also had this rotation of people that have been bad choices for the school board, and it just makes people crazy.
Yeah. Well, former House Speaker Michael Madigan's defense team started their cross-examination this week. What have we been hearing from them so far?
Well, the defense team has been trying to beat up the star witness for the prosecution, which right now is former ComEd Vice President Fidel Marquez. He's already pleaded guilty several years ago. He helped the prosecution in convicting the so-called ComEd 4, which included Michael McLean, one of the co-defendant in Mike Madigan's trial now. And what the prosecution has been trying to do is rehabilitate Marquez every time the defense drags him down.
So it's quite the back and forth, I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Madigan has put aside $8 million from his campaign funds to help pay for his defense. They're going to take every swing they can in this, and they've now said that this trial that was going to end in mid-December may go into mid-January.
Oh boy. Well, another long-running drama of an entirely different kind. Danny, you first reported this week the Bears have a new site in mind for their new stadium. Tell us about the idea of the Michael Reese campus.
Until the next one.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Right. I've got a tally mark.
Right. Well, so, the Bears drama, obviously the Bears since April have been pushing this idea of building a stadium on the lot south of Soldier Field. That's drawn a lot of pushback from Friends of the Parks, the Lakefront Preservation Group. And you had that group as well as the Civic Federation saying maybe you ought to consider this other site, the former Michael Reese Hospital site just south of McCormick Place. The Bears have said publicly numerous times, at least the CEO, Kevin Warren, has said that site's too narrow, it doesn't work. There was this sort of, kind of quiet proposal in the background saying, hey, we could build it over the metro tracks that run alongside this site. And now the Bears, I think, are recognizing that their effort to, one, win legislative support for their idea next to Soldier Field and obviously, get past some of the opposition, local opposition, isn't going well. And so they've had to basically reconsider and start these conversations to say, you know what, let's explore some different alternatives at the former Michael Reese Hospital site. There are some advantages. It could be an extension of McCormick Place. This is right by the convention center. Does that bring in other funding opportunities? Does it become another asset for the city in bringing more conventions to Chicago? So it's, the latest chapter, but of course the big question remains, is this worth public money? And that's the bigger question at play here.
Well, Mawa Iqbal, how about that? I mean, state lawmakers have been very reluctant to offer any public funding for a sports stadium. Does this have any better chance than the other proposals do?
Not sure. I mean, like you said, Governor Pritzker has come out repeatedly against allocating any state funding to the Bears project. And I think it's really, it'll be interesting to see now with this looming budget deficit, right? Like what they decide to do in the spring. I should also mention that there's been a lot of drama, and that came up a lot this veto session, actually, this past week with funding the Tier 2 pension system, which has been chronically underfunded for many, many, many years. And so a bunch of workers, public workers, EMS workers came and lobbied for that. So that's another financial consideration that lawmakers will have to wrestle with. So it'll be interesting. I'll be interested to see what happens. I'm not going to, I guess, put a lot of hope into it to see if they, yeah.
Probably a wise choice on your part. I mean, Danny, we've got about 30 seconds left. The fact that this has been such a long vacant site that they've struggled to get any traction on, do you think that could be a point in its favor, perhaps, to gin up some more support?
I think because of its location, it's closer, to the south side of the city. That has some opportunities there for people to come support this. Toni Preckwinkle, who obviously knows that neighborhood quite well, she's basically trying to quietly push this and say, hey, there might be some opportunities to support this here. So, there could be, again, a few more boxes that could be checked, maybe less opposition, a clearer path for the Bears there. But again, it comes down to funding, and until that piece of the puzzle changes, this is all just kind of ideas.
Well, were perfect pieces of the puzzle tonight. We appreciate you joining us, but we are out of time, so our thanks to Laura Washington, Danny Ecker, Ray Long, and from Springfield, Mawa Iqbal. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Tonight's presentation of Chicago Tonight, Week in Review, is made possible in part by Ann and Rich Carr, BNSF Railway, Francine and Dr. Anthony Brown, and the Mullenhour Progressive Philanthropic Fund, in honor of Ida Mullenhour, supporting quality journalism. Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family. The Polk Brothers Foundation. Additional support is provided by
And that's our show for this Friday night. Don't forget you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. Now for the Week in Review, I'm Nick Blumberg. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a nice weekend. Okay, Danny, some other Bears news. Offensive coordinator Shane Waldron is out after just 9 games on the job. Was he really that bad?
Well, see, this is more, people are more interested in this than they are anything to do with the stadium, right? Well, and this is unfortunately is just the same cycle of Bears, right? It's new quarterback, then new coach. Oh, that coach didn't draft that quarterback. Okay, so then it's, you know, new quarterback after that. And it's unfortunately rinse and repeat for the Bears, and it drives people nuts. This is another sign that that's not changing.
Yeah, and these young, inexperienced quarterbacks that they're not just taking some time to learn the ropes, they're tossing them out there and seeing what they can do.
Yeah, it's a nutty time, and you can look back all the way to Justin Fields and go, gosh, could he have pulled it off? You know, there's all kinds of talk about who could have done it right, who could have done it better, etc.
But maybe if they had their big, beautiful stadium out in Arlington Heights, that's where they would be having
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud to recognize its 20 attorneys recognized in the 2025 edition of the Best Lawyers in America.